Hello, everyone. It is Friday, September 18th, which means it's another Experience Investigators Ask Me Anything webinar. And I'm thrilled to see you all here. This week, we're going to be talking about how to improve customer experience through employee experience and some ideas around that. Now, we do this every Friday at this time, with a few exceptions. And you are welcome to join us from wherever you are at this time here on LinkedIn Live. You can also join us on YouTube later. These are all recorded and uploaded there. But if you would like some reminders, go ahead and check out bit.ly/CX Weekly, and you can sign up for some reminders there, which is hopefully helpful to you. And we love seeing you week after week. So as you settle in, I would love to know where you're joining us from. I would also love to hear something that we're talking about a little bit this week, because my friend John Garrett came out with this book, What's Your And? It's all about unlocking the person behind the professional, which I love. It's about, understanding who we are as people and asking people, what are their interests outside of work? What do you love to do when you're not working? And so those of you who get the newsletter saw that I wrote about this week. If you'd like that newsletter, you can sign up for bit.ly/Jeannie-letter. It's really a letter more than a newsletter, because I just write it to our subscribers. But if you don't know me, I am Jeannie Walters, and I have been, I'm the CEO of Experience Investigators. And I have been doing some form of customer experience work for about 20 years. I'm spending a lot of my time now doing a lot of virtual presentations, some articles and things like that. But I'm also really, really enjoying right now coaching customer experience leaders. And it's fascinating because there's no perfect customer experience program, right? There's nothing that we can do out of the box over and over. Every single time that we tackle these issues as customer experience leaders, we have to be creative, and we have to really understand nuance and all of these wonderful things. So I love that work because it helps me really understand what you guys are going through. It also, I think, helps us look to the future of what can we do even better for our customers, which is pretty exciting. And these are all the ways that you can find me, as well as, LinkedIn, and I'm on Instagram and all sorts of places. So feel free to reach out. We love hearing from you. And as always, we have David Hornreich, our Director of Marketing, joining us. So hi, David.
Hello. Had to wait for my computer to wake up this morning, but here I am.
Well, excellent. Well, we were talking about the what's your and idea. Here it is. And I admitted in the newsletter that one of my passions is musical theater, not actually performing it, because nobody needs to see that, but actually attending musicals. And, I listen to the soundtracks, and I just love kind of the escapism of all of it. And so in my letter this week, I shared some of the songs that I use for kind of getting into the moment. When I want to be motivated, I play My Shot from Hamilton. And when I need
How does that one go, Jeannie? Can you give us a few more?
I think everybody's familiar with that. I don't think we need to subject anybody to that.
Okay.
So David, I'm opening this up. What's your and? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, well, first, I'm just going to put this little notice up here. If anyone wants to learn more about the book, they can do so here. I thought long and hard about my and I couldn't nail down one thing, but I think the general idea is learning. I really love learning anything new, especially if I'm not forced to learn it for work, like if it's just my own choice. So right now, my wife and I are learning to play piano. We're learning how to garden. I'm very, very slowly trying to learn Spanish. So anytime where I feel like I know more at the end of the day than I did at the beginning of the day, I just get so excited about that.
That's cool. That's a great one. And
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of my ands too, now that I think about it, because I love learning, and I love learning about things that I didn't even know I needed to know. That's why in some cases I love reading historical fiction novels, because sometimes I pick things out that I'm like, I have never thought about what the revolution in the Congo was like, but through a novel, I can learn about it, and it opens up everything. So, yeah, that's a really good
Yeah.
one. So
Yeah.
so where are folks joining us from today, and what are some of their ands?
We've got Abdul from Saudi Arabia. Abdullah, great to
Nice.
see you as always. We've got Rakesh from India, and this will surprise you. We've got Tyler Betts
Tyler,
from Colorado. He
excellent.
says, "For my and well, beyond my twin children, I'm incredibly excited for the Bundesliga to kick off this weekend. I'm more of a Premier League man myself. I can only manage so many leagues, but
Mhm.
yeah, that is really exciting. I haven't been following that at all.
Now where is that league based? Because
That's Germany, if I'm not
ah,
mistaken.
okay. Correct
Tyler,
us
feel
if
free to
we're wrong,
correct me.
Tyler.
Yeah, feel free to correct and shame me. But
So, my husband is a huge Premier League fan, and he's also, specifically a Liverpool fan, and so it's been a really exciting year
yeah,
here, because he and the it's a great story because the whole reason he's a Liverpool fan is because he was, an exchange student in the UK for a while and wanted to go to a match and just ended up on the Liverpool side of the stadium and decided that it was in his best interest to be a Liverpool fan, and from that day on, he has been a very dedicated Liverpool fan.
brilliant, brilliant. Wait, you know,
Yeah, yeah, there we go, there we go. All
um,
right.
Abdullah has added his and is discovering the unknown. I love
Ooh,
that. I love
love
that.
that. Yeah.
Saptarshi is here. Great to see you, Saptarshi.
Yay.
And Tyler has confirmed Germany is correct.
Okay, excellent,
If
good.
I get nothing right in this webinar, I'll have that.
Yeah, and I think they're piping in the crowd noises and stuff, so it's kind of
Yeah.
fun to watch. It is.
We should pipe in crowd noise for the webinar. So
Oh, let's do that next time. I can't wait to hear the crowd goes wild. But
yeah,
they also pipe in the booze and stuff too, so we could avoid that.
yeah, yeah,
Well, we should probably just jump in and get
yeah.
started.
I'll let you
We
get
have
to it.
we have our regulars here. We have some new people. It's always good to see you all. Thank you for joining us as always. And today we're going to be talking about employee experience and customer experience. And how does the employee experience really impact the customer experience? And as you can see here, this is a big issue. This is from the latest, or this year's, the 2020 LinkedIn Global Talent Trends report. And 96% of talent leaders said that employee experience was becoming more important. And that was even, I won't say pre-pandemic, but it was kind of pre all the sweeping changes we've seen since March. So now you think about how we have people distributed all over the world, working from home, all of these different things that are, facing us, and we have to kind of embrace the fact that this is probably even more important. Um, and the other thing that I like to think about is when I get asked about employee experience, a lot of times I'm asked, well, how do we measure employee engagement? And that seems to be the highest priority. And so engagement is a huge influencer on how that your employees can deliver customer experience, but it goes beyond engagement. And we really need to start thinking about how can we prepare our employees from before they join us all the way through their journey, just like we think about customer experience. Because a lot of organizations just look at customer facing employees as the ones who need to know these things. They say things like, well, we don't have to worry about telling our accounting team about customer experience because they don't really have anything to do with it. But I'm sure all of you here agree that they absolutely do. Every single person in your organization, they play some form of role where they deliver on the customer experience, whether that's on the back end, where maybe they're not interacting with customers directly, where it could be they are serving other employees in the organization who need to do their role for the customer. So there are all sorts of connections here that sometimes we act like are not connected. And that's what I am seeing over and over. And that's why I wanted to talk about this today. Because the bottom line is this: Improving the employee experience absolutely improves the customer experience. And when you look at how some of the best organizations have been designed, this is um, this is the headline, I guess. You look at how Zappos and organizations like that put a focus on employee experience. They absolutely understand that the employees that they have are the secret sauce in delivering on their customer experience, and not just the customer service reps, and not just the frontline cashiers, and not just your salespeople. This goes way beyond that. And we need to think about what is the employee journey, what are the key parts of that, and how can we really deliver? And this is really using best practices from customer experience. Now, I'm sure some of you might be thinking, hang on, I'm not the chief human resources officer. I'm not the chief talent officer. What do I have to do with any of this? But the best organizations in the world, they build a bridge there. And I think that's what I would love to see you do, to encourage you to do. Build these bridges with your talent group, with your recruiting group, with your chief HR officer or your chief people officer, because that's where the magic happens when we can really connect the employee journey and the customer journey and make it so that they can deliver the best customer experience in the world because they're having a great experience too. And it's reflected in every aspect of the organization. So, today, this is a big topic. We're going to talk about 3 touch points where employee experience and customer experience really meet, and how you can leverage this in your organization. So, what we're going to be talking about today: first impressions, the candidate experience. We're going to be talking about how to gather that employee feedback and what to do. And then working through change, which, I mean, if there was a theme for 2020, this might be it, right? But the best organizations in the world, they have this attitude regardless of what's happening in the world. And so I think that's another area where if we don't really pay attention to the employee experience, we miss opportunities as both an organization and as customer experience leaders. So let's dive in. So the first one is thinking about the candidate experience. I know that I'm not the only one who has had some miserable candidate experiences in my life. It is not uncommon to treat job seekers as, nuisances in a way. And when we don't look at this first part of the employee experience as a way to say out loud to every potential employee, this is who we are. These are our values. This is how you will fit in and help us deliver for our customers. If we don't put all of that information out there right away, then we might attract people who don't align with those values. We might attract the wrong people from the very beginning and then put them on this journey where they're never really going to succeed on behalf of our customers because they were never aligned with what we're doing anyway. So we need to communicate that customer experience mission. We need to communicate those values in everything we do. A great example, if you look out there at job postings, a lot of job postings now, the brands that are getting this, they have a paragraph in there on every single job posting of this is who we are, this is what we believe, this is what we expect across the board, no matter what the job is. I think that's key because you want to, again, attract the right people who can actually deliver on that customer experience mission. The other thing to think about here is what first impression is your brand making? If your employees, if your candidates who are going through this job seeking process are treated like a nuisance, are told, yeah, come in and interview and then never hear from anybody, are have to go through these cumbersome and complex systems in order to actually just submit an application. All of those things are setting up what's acceptable and what's not in your organization. So if I'm a candidate and I don't get a call back and then, for maybe 8 weeks or something, and then I finally get that call back, I'm learning that it's acceptable to just, call back when it's acceptable to me, to delay that process. If I am applying for a job in a high touch, luxury hotel or something, and I get handed this bad, over copied generic job application, what is that telling me? Well, it's telling me that not every touch point matters. So these are the types of things that if we look at that front end of the experience, we have to consider what are all of the first impressions that we're making for this candidate. And then how is the actual experience communicating what you stand for? Because if you tell people that you are responsive and you are, high end, high touch, and then they don't live that in their journey, that's really not reflecting what you want the experience to be. So, one of the things that comes across in these brands that do this really well, they make sure that that whole process reflects who they are. So if they say they're a friendly brand, they're going to make sure that that whole process is warm and friendly for the candidate. Even those who don't get the job, you still want them to walk away and feel good about your brand. Now, the ones that do get the job, you also want to think about how can we make sure that as we are onboarding them, as they get that first role with our organization, how are we actually incorporating these values, repeating that customer experience mission? Don't just give it to them once in an orientation. Actually help them understand how to live it during that onboarding process. Show great examples of how employees have lived up to that mission. Pair them up with customer champions, even if it's not the role that they're going to have, so that they really understand what the end result is with the customer experience. Excuse me. And what promises are you demonstrating you make for customers or employees? So when you are making those promises to a candidate or to a new employee and say, we're going to call you back in 48 hours, that's a promise. What are you telling them if you don't live up to that? So make sure that you are really looking at how are we showing up throughout this process for both the candidates who maybe, again, won't get the job all the way through that first part of the employee journey. It's really, really important because to attract the best people, we absolutely have to make a great first impression. It's just part of what we have to do, right? But we have to align that first impression with our customer experience and the mission around our customer experience so that we attract the right people. And also so that once they join us, they know what those expectations are. They know that we have high standards around our customer experience, and we're going to honor that by giving them a great experience too. So another big thing is employee feedback, right? We ask employees all the time for feedback in annual surveys or things like that. I have seen this done really poorly in the past, I'll be honest. My least favorite example, but my favorite example to bring up as something not to do, was this annual survey about your manager, about all these things, and it was supposed to be anonymous. And then what would happen is that the managers who got poor feedback, they had an opportunity to change it by actually inviting employees into a conference room. Now, again, it was supposed to be anonymous, but it was all of the department, and talk through the issues. And employees hated this with a passion. They hated it because they felt like, first of all, they couldn't really be honest, that they were being punished for being honest because these meetings were awful and long and nobody wanted to be there. And then at the end of this, they would do the survey again. And the idea behind it was, okay, we'll see if you guys talked through all these issues. But of course, you guys know what I'm going to say. The employees would be like, yeah, let's just give our manager all 5 so we never have to have those meetings again. So we have to really think about what are we asking employees. So there's the big annual engagement, that type of thing. But then I also encourage you to gather feedback about the customer experience and for the customer experience. So really understand, do these employees get how their role connects to the customer experience? How do we actually connect those dots for them? And then the other thing is that they have great ideas. And often we don't ask our employees about how would you improve this? How do you live the customer experience mission? How can we live our customer experience mission better? And gather that specific feedback about the customer experience. Because one of the things that I love about this term engagement, if you think about it that way, is by asking somebody to be engaged, that's actually a form of engagement. It's letting them know we care about your opinions. We think you're smart people. We hired you for a reason. And even if it's not in your specific role, we still want to hear about what you think about the customer experience because that's how important it is. So the act of asking can actually be a way to engage and ask for those specific outcomes. So instead of just there are two things, two ways to ask. One is about specific outcomes. So sometimes you can say to somebody, based on your role, how can we make checkout better for the customer? How can we make paying invoices better? How can we make finding products better? Whatever that is. But ask for those specific things. But then it's also fun to ask for these big ideas. And one of my favorite ways to do this is to say, if you had a magic wand, so like throw off those limitations of budget and resources and people and everything, and just think about what could we do? What would you do to improve the experience for our customers? You will get some great ideas. And maybe they're just a seed of an idea right now, but if you nurture those over the, next few weeks or months or even years, then those could turn into game changers for your customer experience. Your employees see things all the time that they wish were different. And so empowering them to let you know what those things are, you can find some amazing ideas. You can get them involved in the customer experience. You can really start seeing change within your organization. So that's one of my favorite things to do. And you can do this throughout the year. You can do this based on milestones. You can do this based on their journey, just like you would for a customer. So maybe you check in with them, 2 weeks into employment, and then 90 days, and then a year, and then 3 years, whatever it is, or based on specific events within their own journey too. But you can check in with these very quick ways of saying, we want you to think about the customer experience and we want your ideas and input. It can be very empowering for the employees to hear that. So, working through change, what is there to say about this? Here's what tends to happen. When an organization has been around for a while, a lot of times they become very product centric and short term centric. So, they are very focused on product rollouts, on product roadmaps, that type of thing. The best companies in the world are very adaptable, and they do this based on the customer and based on the problems that the customers have and based on solving those. So when we are looking at flexible organizations, they understand that it's not just about the buyer's journey or the customer journey. We have to look at the ecosystem, not only of our customers, but also of our employees. And this is super important today because, as we know, our ecosystems have changed as employees. We might not be going into the office. We don't have to deal with public transportation. We are stuck at home in some cases. We have family at home. We have different technology challenges. Those are all the types of things in the ecosystem we have to be aware of to help our organizations work through change and be adaptable, because we have to make sure that everybody has enough support on that foundational level to get their work done and to feel safe and secure. But then we also want to say, hey, let's focus on customers. Let's focus on the problems that we can solve. Let's get beyond that product roadmap and go back to how can we serve our customers. So this helps organizations actually stay ahead of trends because they're not responsive. They're being a little more proactive. They're looking to the future. They're looking at what are their customers actually going through? What are our employees actually going through? And how can we make sure that we're supporting our employees in the right way so that they can help lead our customers and not just respond to them? This is a great way to challenge the status quo, be a disruptor. When you really understand the ecosystems of your customers and your employees, then this helps you really understand how to disrupt. Where is that opportunity in the experience where you could serve customers in a new way that nobody else is doing? It's a great way to just open yourself up if you're constantly aware of your customers and your employees. And then this is really about that cycle that we talk about a lot. It's a continuous cycle of listening, planning, and acting. And then you go back and listen again and do the whole thing again. Because if we are listening to our employees in the right ways, and if they are listening to their customers in the right ways, and we are empowering them to share that information and to think bigger and to look at the entire ecosystem, then you can start shifting around, how you plan. Maybe it's not about only the product roadmap. It's about, what we think that in a year our customers are going to be dealing with this. How can we solve that for them? How can we support them? How can we shift our experience to meet their needs even better? So there's a lot of innovation and kind of ideation here. And I think that the more we include people in that process as employees, the better everybody is. We sometimes just forget, and we sometimes think that, well, employees are doing their jobs, they know their role, all of those things, and we put all of these incentives around very short-term goals. If we start thinking bigger and encouraging our employees to really look beyond that one role, that one goal, then that can really serve your customer experience long term. So, a couple things. One is to remember to communicate the customer experience mission consistently and constantly, basically. This has to be starting from before they become a candidate with you. This is when, like I said, you put it on your job postings, you make sure that it's repeated throughout the employee experience. It never goes away. What I like to do when I'm working with clients sometimes is they say, "Oh, yeah, we communicate this stuff. We always talk about our mission." I'll just walk through the halls and ask 4 or 5 people. And I can't tell you how many times I've stopped 4 or 5 people, and I've been lucky to get one who can actually articulate it on the spot. You want people to articulate this on the spot. They need to live it. They need to put it into their hearts and make sure that they're internalizing it in order to deliver on that. So again, communicate, communicate, communicate. We need to listen to employees and understand both their engagement, that big, how are they doing? How do they feel about their boss and everything else? And their ideas for customers. And we need to ask for those more frequently. I just saw a great example of this. One of the companies out there that has those kiosks where you say happy, neutral, or sad, like in bathrooms and things like that. You guys have probably seen those things. They actually have a website widget on their intranet, and they ask their employees every single day, please rate your work day. And so they get this immediate pulse of information about what their employees are feeling. And then they share some of those results on the Slack channel. They share about what they're doing. It's a very transparent way to do it. And I just thought it was really clever that they use their own technology to hear from their employees on a regular basis. And then we need to focus on the customer's ecosystem and how to solve their problems and not just meet those deadlines, not just roll out those products, not just have those goals. We really need to make sure that we're understanding the customer's ecosystem and, in today's world, the employee's ecosystem too, and how those two things intersect so that we can really deliver on that customer experience. So before we get to questions here, I just want to ask you guys, what practices in your organization are you using to boost customer experience by way of employee experience? What are those connections that you guys are making? And then where are there opportunities for both improving CX and EX through employee experience initiatives? What are you thinking about right now that maybe you'll do differently, or that you'll offer, or that you'll seek out information about in your own organization? So I'd love to hear that. And at this point, I'd love to open it up to questions. Hopefully, I didn't even say in the beginning, ask questions in the chat. I just kind of skipped that part, but I called it and asked me anything. So hopefully you guys caught on.
We'll get some questions in a moment here. First, I just want to highlight a comment that I think sums it up very well. Happy employees equal happy guests. Happy employees, happy customers. It's fantastic.
There you go. It's so true. It's so true. And it's one of those things that I think we intuitively know. Like, it makes perfect sense, right? Like, the happier the employee, the better the customer experience. But we don't always think that we need to put process around it. We don't always think that we need to, check in with employees about it. We don't necessarily connect the dots as much as we should. So it's a great point.
I think that leads us nicely to a question from Saptarshi here. Not every organization is focusing on communicating a customer experience mission to their employees and to boost employee experience. So for these organizations. How do we get this going?
hmm Well, this is where I say start where you are, right? Like make sure that if you have a small group or if you are the change agent, then go ahead and do what you can. Because sometimes we can't really get our leadership on board with this. We can't really move them right away. So what I like to do is, look around, see if you can get together your band of customer experience champions. And if you need to create a mission that works within the rules around, it has to work within your corporate mission, it has to work within certain parameters. But if you create your own customer experience mission, start communicating that internally and just say, hey, this is what we're using. This is what we're relying on to guide us, to be our North Star. I've seen this work really well with contact centers. I've seen this work really well with account management groups who basically take it on. They say, okay, we can't get the whole organization on board yet, but we're going to start where we are. And they start communicating it and they start putting it on the walls and on their computers and they start sharing it in the Slack channels and all of those things. And occasionally, leadership will start paying attention and say, hey, we need to rewrite this. Great, get them involved. I think the challenge is that if if leaders don't really buy into the idea of customer experience as something that has a return on the investment, which we've talked about a lot here, and we put that into our CX success statement workbook a couple weeks ago that's available on our site. And if you're thinking about those things, we sometimes need to really work hard to make a case for it. And with customer experience mission, start with that, start building your mission, start building your success statement, start really understanding what does leadership need to know in order to be convinced of this. But my best advice is start where you are, start however you can. Start looking for those change agents among you that can help you, that can be on your team of, happy customer warriors that are out there trying to make the change because it can be a little bit of an uphill battle.
Let's jump to a question from email. Uh, how can we measure what effect employee experience improvements have on customer experience?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I think there are a couple ways. I mean, first of all, just straight up, you know, straightforward surveys before and after with your employees, and then matching that with those customer experience metrics as well. So as you make improvements to training or to onboarding or things like that, um, you know, the before and after feelings of the employees can tell you one side of the coin. And then you can look at those customer experience metrics. Maybe you have a customer satisfaction survey at the end of a customer service call, and you can start tracking those transactions before and after. So there are ways to do it. You just have to kind of plan a little bit to make sure that you have that baseline. So even if you don't feel like, oh gosh, we're doing nothing around the employee experience right now, what should we measure? Start measuring engagement. Start doing those surveys about how do they feel. Start asking about how do they see their role as it fits in with customer experience, and just see what happens as a baseline, and then that gives you something to improve upon as well.
I want to follow up with Saptarshi. He says he's going to try to approach the account management team at his
Good.
organization with this. So I just wanted to add, Saptarshi, for you and for everybody else, we are in the process of developing a customer experience mission statement helper workbook guide, kind of similar to the CX success statement one that we've created. So I've got a hard deadline to have that ready by next week's webinar.
Wow, you're saying it out loud.
I'm saying it out loud. I'm putting it out publicly. So next week, you'll either have that or you just won't see me at all and you'll never hear from me again. So Saptarshi, I'll make sure that you get that as soon as it's ready, but we'll have that for everybody next Friday as well.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is just a David question that I'm going to throw at you, but it was something that popped into my mind as I was watching you talk, Jeannie. What are the best ways to create an environment where employees feel comfortable giving honest feedback, even if it's critical?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll be talking a little bit in the next few weeks about culture, and it's part of employee experience for sure, but it's also like it's a whole ball of wax. And culture has everything to do with that, right? Because if people are not empowered to be honest and authentic about their feedback, then you're going to get just what I talked about in the webinar, all those fives, because people don't want to be punished for actually speaking up. So there are a couple ways. I think, anonymous is really important. And some organizations do this through hotlines, through, special email addresses, things like that. I know that a lot of retailers have shoplifting hotlines specifically for employees because employees are sometimes the number one reason that they call it shrinkage in those stores when product just walks away. And so some retailers actually provide an employee hotline where you can call it. You don't have to give your name, so they don't know because they found that people didn't want to kind of rat out their colleagues. And so by allowing them to do it anonymously, they found that they were able to get a lot more information in a timely way. So I think as long as we can provide those different channels, that can be really important. I've also done things with clients where sometimes I come in, set up shop for a few days in a conference room, and just have tons of interviews. And then I roll up that information into kind of the macro level. I never use names. I never say, like, oh, and by the way, John's really disgruntled, nothing like that. And so if you can bring in a third party like that, that can be very effective as well. I really love interviews. You guys have heard me say this with customers too. I love interviews because I think you can see the body language. You can really understand more about their emotional state sometimes. So if you have a specific issue, like a specific department or something that isn't quite right, sometimes interviewing can be a really effective way to do that. But then you want to roll that up to the macro level so that it's not obvious. You can't say, like if you've one account manager, you can't say, well, an account manager told me. You can't do any of that. You have to be careful with how you present it, but that can be very effective as well. But it's a culture thing, really. I mean, if you have a culture where people don't feel like they're going to be heard or listened to, or they will be punished for being honest, that's a pretty hard thing to overcome. So if you feel like your culture isn't quite there, that's what I would work on first. How can we start creating a better culture?
Great. Let's jump to a question from Abdullah. And Abdullah, if I'm misinterpreting the question, let me know and we can make sure to address that. But the question is, how can we improve the employee experience by KPI strategy? So I think what that's asking is, what are the KPIs that we should be using to measure employee experience success?
Interesting. Okay. So some of this I'm going to defer to my HR friends because I don't want to claim to be an expert on everything employee experience. There are some really specific employee engagement metrics that are used. Some organizations actually do this in a homegrown way. They have custom metrics that they use. But a lot of times, like Gallup has the employee engagement survey. You can go look that up. They actually have specific ways of asking those questions. And a lot of times you can figure out kind of based on the role how to poke around on that a little bit. So engagement is one that is more specific, and I would recommend you go look at kind of those HR resources, talk to your HR leaders about how they are measuring engagement and see if you can get access to that. Because a lot of times HR is already doing this. We just haven't talked to them. And that's why we need to keep building those bridges. Engagement is one. And then when you're looking at kind of the connection between employee experience and customer experience, that one I love to ask questions around, how likely, I mean, you can use NPS. How likely are you to recommend us as an employer to your friends? That's a great question. So you can actually measure NPS for the employer brand to find out how people are feeling about that. You can also ask about, how they are delivering on the customer experience, how they feel like their role is connected to the customer experience. Those are those engagement questions again, but in a slightly different way. So there are a couple ways to do that. I know, and then you can also look at behavior, right? Like just like customer experience, we have the emotional, we have the feedback, but then we also have behavioral analytics like retention. How long do employees stay with us? Is it different from role to role? What does that tell you? If everybody's jumping ship in 6 months, that tells you that you've got an employee experience problem. That's a great way to look at it. Retention, exit interviews with employees can tell you a lot. And then if you are looking at behavior again, engagement right now, um, if if you're finding that people are maybe not participating in your big town halls, in your management meetings, in the announcements, in the communications, are they opening the emails from leadership? Are they, participating in the Slack channel and collaborating? There are all these different ways that we could look at behavior that probably give us some clues on that employee experience success as well.
It's a lot of things to look at.
It is. It's always a lot of things to look at. That's what's so fun about it though, but you can always, yeah, there are a zillion rabbit holes everywhere I look.
Yeah. Let's go to one more question from email. So when it comes to asking employees for specific feedback, are there better or worse touch points to invite that feedback? Are there touch points where getting that feedback is more helpful and you can be consistent with it, and are there touch points where it's probably best not to try to collect feedback because it just gets too messy or whatever that may be?
And this is on the employee journey? I just wanna make
This
sure
is
I'm
on the employee journey,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I think, so there are certain key points, just like in a customer journey, especially in the beginning, where you do wanna check in. You wanna make sure they feel like they're engaged quickly. So how did the onboarding process go? That's a great touch point. I wouldn't call it onboarding process to them. I would make sure that you customize that language, but asking about how do they feel when they're first engaged with your organization, checking in 90 days in, 90 days for customers and for employees. It's a great time to check in because that's when people start feeling like, okay, I'm not as new. I should be learning more. I should be feeling more engaged, or they're really kind of, they're off to the races. They're feeling really engaged. That's a great place to do that. I would not necessarily look for feedback right after the annual review, for instance. And the reason is because they're kind of serving two different needs. So, as an employee, if I get a review from my manager, I'm going to hear about things I'm doing well, but I'm also going to hear about things I need to work on. And human nature, what do? We dwell on the stuff that we need to work on, right? Or we're convinced that our manager is full of it. And so if we check in there, it's kind of skewed because their emotional state is in a different place. So I would probably avoid that one. But I would look at the specific employee role and the specific journey and figure out, like, are there moments where it's pretty intense, right? Like with our customer service reps right now, how was March and April for them? That was probably really hardcore. They had to be dispersed in many cases for the first time. They had to work from home, they had to figure out their technology. And then at the same time, they were getting all of this intense connection with customers who were having a lot of anxiety, who were, in their own situations that were shifting. And it was an intense time, and it continues to be. So if you know about certain kind of specific events like that, that's a great time to just check in and say, "Hey, we know it's been intense. How are you feeling right now? How can we support you? How do you feel like we're delivering to the customers? What could we do to make it better for our customers?" Those would be great times to check in. I would just be really aware of, the actual journey and kind of those emotional spikes that are bound to happen. Sometimes it's good to tap into those, like in the specific case of what happened in March and April. Sometimes, if it's their own individual kind of state, I would just think about what the goals are and make sure you're lining those up.
I think that's going to do it for questions this week. I do want to highlight a comment from Tyler going back to that question about KPIs to measure employee experience. I think
Mhm.
this is a good one. A
Oh, yeah,
percent of
that's great.
candidates that are from a referral is a great
Mhm.
employee experience measurement. Um, if your
Yeah,
employees are happy, they're going to recommend you.
yeah.
And if not, they're not.
It's very true. That's a really, really good one. And I think it's funny because again, I started this by talking about like if you apply customer experience best practices, a lot of this makes sense. And that's another customer experience best practice, right? Like referral rate. So looking at that is a really great way to see if you are a preferred employer as they're known.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's going to do it for the questions. So, Jeannie, where can folks find you?
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us. As always, it's just so great to see you all here, to get your questions, to see the interaction in our community. It's really special, and we really appreciate it. And you can find us in all these different places. We always love hearing from you. You can reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or all those places. We also have plenty of resources where you see the experienceinvestigators.com/resources. That's where our blog is, as well as the downloadables that we talked about. And apparently we'll have a new one next week. So that's pretty exciting. So you guys will hear about that next week. But as always, I just want to thank you because, you've heard me say this before, but my mission is to create fewer ruined days for customers. And by showing up and by learning and by taking this out into the world, you guys are helping me live my mission. So I really appreciate it. So we will see you next week, same time, and we will be talking about more customer experience issues then. In the meantime, take very good care of yourselves, and thank you again for being here.